For this video, I've given some thought to all the variables that I've noticed in sex over the years at different times and with different people. And I thought we'd go through that list, and if you have other variables, you can add them in comments below. But sex is in the middle of a variety of different influences, some that expand the flow and intensity and multidimensionality, and some that narrow that down. One of the things that affects sex is the amount of emotional need in the relationship. If one party is in a regressed place, which is typically associated with a lack of survival, security, strong sense of love and belonging and self-esteem, or a lack of traumatic repair of childhood trauma, then the emotions are likely to be young. The child's form of love is to need. To need in order to survive, to feel secure, to gain a sense of love and belonging. And in a need-based relationship, there's often an abuse contract. The child essentially says to the parent at one level, "What do I have to do? What do I have to be for you to meet my needs?" And the parent dictates that. And typically, in the process, the child will cut off parts of their personality, suppress certain feelings, suppress certain tendencies, and try and fit into the mold of the parent, which, if the parent is somewhat healthy, will be a somewhat healthy mold. If the parent is highly narcissistic and abusive, the contract might read something like, "I will never tell my truth because it might upset you. I will tell lies that make you feel good about yourself. I will keep certain family secrets, etc. And then you will help me survive, feel secure, and give me a sense of love and belonging." But it's out of an emotional need. Now, emotional need, particularly when two people are in a place of strong emotional need, intensifies emotion, which often correlates to intensifying sensation. And so a need element in which one or both inner children is involved can lead to greater intensity. However, many childhood relationships are abusive. The relationship with the child and the parent is often abusive, and if the partner that is being needed has been highly abused when they needed as an infant, as a child, then if the one person is more needy emotionally, the other person will attack with disgust and dissociation, mirroring and externalizing their own childhood wound. If the other partner responds as the nurturing parent, then it may or may not increase sexual need, but it will increase a sense of intensity and closeness. It may or may not increase the sexual energy, but it will increase the closeness. I've noticed in several relationships where both I and my partner both were well matched in a sense of need, that there was an intense sense of presence and engagement that translated into higher sexual energy and expression. Adrenaline, which could be broken down into risk or variety, also increases sexual stimulation. If you're having sex in a risky environment where you might get caught, if you're having sex with with someone you're not supposed to, whether it's a cult protocol or a business protocol, if you're having an affair, whatever, there's an element of risk. And with risk comes adrenaline, and with adrenaline comes increased awareness of the body, increased arousal. There's also variety, and with variety comes uncertainty, because when we're dealing with variety, things are more new. And so again, there's more presence, there's more awareness in the body. The first time that you have sex with someone, it's easier to be aware of every nuance than it is the 100th time you have sex with someone. Hedonic adaptation is a continual process of replacing felt moment-to-moment experience with memory. And so the first experience, you're fully there and present, but by the third experience, you may be expecting things to go the way they generally go, and so there's more attention off in some other area, relying purely on memory. It's not always clear how this affects a given sexual experience, but it certainly has an impact. If the cult, if the family, if the social system around you supports the sexual experience or does not, and whether you have beliefs that sexuality is fundamentally healthy, fundamentally neutral, or fundamentally bad. So the cult blessing or curse on the situation. And, and again, this has, in puritanical cults, this may have more to do with something like homosexuality, or sex without, outside of marriage, etc. But basically, it doesn't really matter what the situation is. Some cults are racist, so the cult may not bless someone of a different race, may not bless someone of a different age if they're ageist. Capitalist cults may not bless a relationship between someone who's rich and someone who's poor. Any number of things like that. Sensitivity and the presence that comes from sensitivity is a point on this kind of continuum of impact. 10 to 20% of the population is atypically sensitive, more sensitive than the other 80%. And so you can take the highly sensitive person test, or your partner can take the highly sensitive person test. Just go online and HSP test. And someone who's highly sensitive physiologically will be more responsive, which will bring more intensity and increase the intensity of the sexual experience. If there is love, the child's love is the love of need, I need you. The adolescent's love is the love of lust, I want you. The adult's love is the love of leadership. It is the behavior in such a way that facilitates the survival, security, sense of love and belonging, self-esteem, development of gifts and unique inner traits, bringing those gifts out into the world, and finally moving beyond the obsession with the individual self to participate in a larger organizing structure. That's adult love. When the more love there is, the more connection, the more intensity. So if there is, I need you, and the other person responds to that need, I want you, and the other person responds to that lust. And there is a receptivity to receiving the adult love, which is the nurturing parent, the one that ensures that first inside and then outside the basic human needs in their hierarchy are met and responded to. Then we come to the masculine-feminine template. In the masculine and feminine template, the feminine and masculine energies embodied by the parents or caregiver set the template. So if mom was emotional and dad responded by rolling his eyes, then the template is patronization of the feminine energy. And if both people in a sexual relationship share a template, one person has feelings and both of them roll their eyes about it, there's not tension, but there isn't a lot of flow. The greatest flow comes with honor. If the feminine in the template is always violated or denigrated, then in order to access the strongest sexual flow, you have to flow within the template. Changing the template is always an option, but we don't practice the technology in our culture of template transformation, which means that there's a strong tendency to marry your mother, marry your father, in order to reenact the template that is laid in there unconsciously. And so if the family template is, say, one of humiliating and abusing the feminine, dad humiliated and abused mom, or mom was butch and dad was gentle and sensitive and emotionally present, and he was humiliated for that state, for that feminine state, then in order to access the flow of intense emotions and sexual energy, the sexuality may need to follow a BDSM template in which the masculine partner humiliates or causes pain to the feminine partner, and in doing so accesses all the energy in the template. And sexual intensity correlates with sexual flow or flow of energy. And flow of energy correlates with things lining up. And one of the things you line up with is a template between the masculine and the feminine that has been internalized as the parents' relationship is internalized within and then seeks to unconsciously externalize in the form of a partner capable of playing the opposite parental role to the one you're playing. So if you're a boy identifying with your father, then you will look for a woman who can play the role of your mother archetypally in that template. Transcendent states are a dimension of sexuality. So in time with roughly 100 lovers, about, I would say, 20% of those came close to verging on to full-on transcendent states. So a transcendent state is when space-time expands, when there's a sense of increased dimensionality, increased presence. There can be synchronicity, there can be intuitive experiences, there can be the sense of bigger than the normal self, beyond the mundane. There can be visions, there can be memories. If we look back up here, past life and or past association might tie in here. In fact, with several lovers, I found myself in another world or in another space-time together, looking kind of like through movie cameras at architecture that I've never seen, culture that I've never seen, and understanding things that I did not know before. And coming out of that experience and having access to technology that I did not have before. Insights, awareness, figuring things out, etc. So actually having kind of like a movie experience, and much like if you watched a 2-hour movie, you might come out of it with ideas. Like, oh, that bit doesn't work, but what if I tried that and that? And it's kind of a new import of information. And you can call it whatever you want to. You can call it a fantasy, you can call it a vision, you can call it a future, you can call it a probable reality, a possible reality, a past life, you call it whatever you want. But within the framework of a transcendent state, to me, the idea of past lifetime, particularly since the architecture was not, all chrome and steel or something like that. It was, it seemed more rustic than most of our architecture, more simple and rustic on an external level, but more sophisticated in a social and internal level. And that's actually an interesting awareness about cultures and their trade-offs. That we've traded highly sophisticated iPads with a culture that is emotionally illiterate for a culture that did not seem to have much outer technology, but was incredibly sophisticated in the dimensionality, the complexity of spirituality and of human relationships. What I found interesting in one of this past lives was noticing how things didn't need to be spoken because role and function was kind of portrayed with clothing. And I guess we kind of do that a little bit in the military. You understand someone's a policeman because they're uniform and military and stuff like that. But in this culture, it wasn't policemen. You had a whole different set of different functions and roles based on clothing and location. So you could be playing one role in one location in one set of clothing, and then later be in another role in another set of clothing, and the culture was sophisticated enough that it was understood that what happened in this role didn't carry on over into what happened in this role, and so the visual breaks of clothing, etc., was used to create crisp functional distinctions of a social nature far beyond our social technology. And so a juxtaposition from more advanced social technology and less advanced iPad and that type of technology and vice versa. And so in entering a transcendent state and having a past life vision, which for me has always been triggered by a partner, meaning as I'm opening up to get to know this partner emotionally, mentally, imaginally, if the conditions are right, a transcendent state opens, and it's like doors opening and accessing screens of consciousness upon which data that is not normally available to the conscious mind is suddenly available. And so that's part of the domain. Obviously, the experience is the richer, the more dimensions that are opened. So if you're only physical and your mind isn't engaged and your heart isn't engaged and your transcendent state isn't engaged, it's less rich than if it's also physical and mental. And it's less rich than if it's physical, mental, and emotional. And it's less rich than if it's full-on emotion. You get the idea. So there's also the dimension of pleasure, which correlates with mental, physical, and emotional attunement. When a partner attunes to another partner, physically, emotionally, or mentally, there is pleasure. When a partner violates the other, and by not attuning, there is pain, there is suffering, there's fear, there's trauma, etc. But when someone attunes, and so this is the process of listening to a partner and finding a flow, a rhythm that attunes to where they're at. There is pleasure. The more pleasure there is, the more attunement there is, the more opening there is. The less attunement there is, the more tightness there is mentally, emotionally, and physically. Because if someone touches you in a way that you don't like to be touched that way at all and they don't get it, and particularly if you point it out to them and they still don't get it, then you expect to be dishonored, to be violated. I like a touch like this, but they're going to touch me like this. It doesn't feel connected. It just feels like I'm a thing that isn't being attuned to. So expecting that, and if you're being treated that way at the beginning of a sexual experience, you have every reason to believe that will continue. Why would it change? If they could treat you more sensitively, they would do so from the start. And so you're going to shut down. Whereas if you really deeply attune to someone, you're going to open up and really want to drink in every bit of the interaction. And this is on multiple levels. Someone might touch you perfectly, but say things that just, oh my gosh, why did you? I don't want to talk about that, and this isn't the time. And so it's a mental violation rather than a mental attunement. Or emotionally, you start feeling this desperate need, and they look at you with disgust or say something humiliating, and so your desperate need collapses, and now it's like, I don't want to open up anymore because I don't want to be violated. I don't want to be dishonored. But on the flip side, emotionally you open up with this wave of need, and your partner says, yes, give it to me. I want that need. Welcome. I'm here for you. There's attunement, there's release, there's connection. Another is safety. Now this ties in with a lot of things. What makes you feel safe? The default instinct is familiarity. So that may be you were abused as a child, you found someone to abuse you in a similar way, you feel comfortable because it's familiar. More sophisticated forms of safety are you analyze your partner's pattern of behavior, pattern of attunement, pattern of honesty, etc., and you decide this is a safe partner. I can go to new places. Now, this is a really big thing because you will not trust yourself to go to the unknown, which includes transcendent places, if you do not trust your partner. And you will not trust your partner if you don't feel safe. And so safety, knowing your partner will never lie to you, knowing that they will never intentionally hurt you, etc., can release a freedom to go into the deeps of the experience, into the depths of the unknown. And it's worth noting that 99.9% of all reality is in the domain, both inside and out. And with trust in the safety, we open up to explore more vulnerably this vast feminine terrain of the unknown. Respect and honor for the ideal. If you believe in masculine alpha strength and that's your ideal, and someone has that characteristic, well, you're going to be drawn to that and engage with that more. If you believe that poor people are bad and beneath you and disgusting somehow, then if you're with a poor person, you're going to not open up as fully, and of course you will be the one robbed of the full-on experience. But there is some sense of the ideal, and people tend to, what really goes on is a little bit of a placebo effect. I discovered this by spending I cuddled platonically with, 10 or so men. And if I shut my eyes, many of the men felt exactly like a woman. And I felt great. And I would open my eyes and it would look a little weird just because of social conditioning. But there's a placebo effect of expecting to feel great when your ideal is encountered. So when you expect to feel great when your ideal encounters, when your ideal is encountered, you feel great. It's a little bit like the game of expensive wine. They've done tests where they give people, 10 sips of wine, and they say, this sip here is $200 a bottle. This one is $500 a bottle. This one is $5 a bottle. And then they ask the people to rate the wine. And generally speaking, people will say, oh, the $500 bottle of wine is just really great. And the $5 wine, is cheap and stuff. But it's the truth is it's all the same wine. That's part of the experiment. So you understand the placebo effect. So if you've decided that someone making $300,000 a year is very romantic and someone who's unemployed is not, and then, and someone with red hair is this, and someone who, when you come up with your little picture, whatever it is, that says this is an attractive person and this isn't, then you meet someone who has those characteristics, you immediately open up to affirm your bias. And so this is one of the problems of, a culture filled with judgment. If you decide that having sex with a 60-year-old woman, couldn't possibly be pleasurable, then it will be discounted because of that bias. If you decide that someone of a certain race or gender certainly couldn't satisfy you, then you will discount the experience to conform with the bias. On the flip side, if you do insist on having a little stereotypical bias, if you find someone who meets that stereotypical framework, then when you have sex with them, you will enjoy it more because you expect to enjoy it more, so you'll open up. And then there may be some actual logistical things along the way. If there is a different experience holding a 6-foot tall individual weighing 150 pounds versus a 5-foot tall individual weighing 100 pounds. There are some, actual differences. And then there's the idea of the differences. The idea, or the placebo effect, accounts for 30 or 40% of many experiences, which is why sugar and water can cure people using the placebo effect sometimes more effectively than the drug that it's being placeboed against. Fear of trauma is a variable. If you've got undiagnosed, unresolved trauma, like most of us, then you will be terrified of the unknown is one of the symptoms, which means you will be terrified of transcendent states, which means you'll be terrified of intimacy. Intimacy leads to transcendent states. Transcendent states leads to the unknown. In the unknown, we are afraid of confronting a new or a memory or something about our trauma. And so we try and control and keep things in a normal status quo to avoid trauma. And that may dramatically hamper sexuality. In other words, a peak sexual partner, someone capable of a profound transcendent state, may actually become someone you actively avoid and disconnect with because some part of you senses that, and you do not want to go into a mystical state, into a transcendent state, because both trauma and transcendent states involve ecstasy, ecstasis. You have the stasis, and trauma shakes you out of the stasis, the status quo. So does ecstasy, so does transcendent experiences. So they're very closely linked. Trauma is being shaken out of the status quo through pain and shock. Transcendent experiences are opening to something bigger than the status quo that is beyond, that is mystical. And yet, if your first entries into the mystical other and unknown are through trauma, you will not want to get near that terrain. You will sense the trauma that's suppressed and buried there, and that many people who have been traumatized, their bottom line is that I never want to feel that again, and so they avoid mystical states. Release of suppressed energy in the shadow. So we talked about the abuse contract. There's all kinds of cult stereotypes. What a nice boy is, what a nice girl is. Girls don't like having sex as much as boys. Whatever the bullshit of the cult is at the current time, the bits of the psyche in the individual and the infant that don't fit into those little boxes get suppressed to make the parent comfortable in most cases. They get suppressed into what's called the dark shadow and the light shadow. The light shadow is things like, girls that like sex are sluts. Sex is a very positive, healing, and beautiful energy. So if you have to suppress your sexual energy, that goes into your light shadow. And girls never get angry, right? And so that goes into your dark shadow, your expansive. The positive things or the expansive things and the contracting things that don't fit into the cult norms go into the light shadow and the dark shadow. Now, it takes energy to keep something separated and suppressed. It takes energy. And if you are suppressing, if you're suppressing something that's a big part of you, it takes lots of energy. Now, when sexuality releases repressed shadow energy, when, oh no, I'm a good girl, I don't like sex, when that gets thrown out and the intensity of desire and passion rushes through in a way that you feel safe, you may not only come to the joy of sexuality in the moment, for example, but flood the body with repressed sexual enjoyment that's been suppressed for weeks or months. And so it's much like a dam. The shadow may function as a dam of some kind or a burial, but at some point, that energy has to be released. It either starts flowing over the dam, or if you put it in a dam that blocks a certain kind of energy, then when you open the floodgates, after 5 years of suppression, it's going to rush through at a much higher velocity than if it had been allowed to flow naturally the whole time. And so the release of the suppressed shadow. So if sexual energy is suppressed and then releases, it'll be more intense. If emotional energy is suppressed and releases, it is more intense. If you're generally in a social circle that makes being polite and pretending to be happy when you're miserable and all that. And then you're finally with a partner that really sees and accepts all you are, and that all rushes out. There's going to be a tremendous amount of intensity, and in some cases a higher likelihood of a transcendent state from that rush and flow of energy. Then we have, in the opposite of love, the transfer of shame or abusive emotions. So I feel shame and inadequate, and I'm angry about that. I feel shame and inadequate because my mother lied to me. My mother never praised me. So there's this sense of asymmetry. I want to be praised for who I am, but I didn't get it. I want to feel valuable, but I didn't get it. So I'm carrying the inadequacy, the shame, etc. from mom or from dad. And I'm pissed about this. And I want to get rid of this feeling. And so here's where, one of the things that sex can be is a delivery vehicle for flowing rage, for flowing hate, for flowing disgust. You dirty slut, I'm going to fuck you in the ground, whatever. That kind of energy can be a way to release all this sense of, anger or hatred or powerlessness. I'm going to make you feel what some stuck part of me feels. And when I've unloaded all that energy onto you, then I'm going to push you away in the same way that that part was pushed into me and then I was kicked away. I'm made to cry and I'm made to feel small and humiliated, etc. And then when I'm crying because dad abused me, then he says, get out of my sight. Good boys don't cry. So then that wound stays in there as a repressed energy and it looks for a way out. If it's not healed and understood and confronted, then suddenly there's some part of the psyche that wants to make someone else feel that small and then say, get the hell out of my sight. And so that's one of the draws to pornography, for example. A lot of the abuse and projection pornography, a lot of female pornography, for example, is men treating women poorly and discarding them. So you're going to embarrass yourself in public. I'll use you the way I want. I won't use a condom. I'll come inside you and then I'll just leave you. And so what that's about is I feel small, angry, hurt, worthless, whatever inside. I don't know what to do with that because I'm in an emotionally illiterate culture that shames need and shames emotionality in general, particularly in men, so I don't know what to do with that. So it's just stuck there. And then an opportunity comes along where someone's willing to be abused at some level because they've got an unconscious abuse contract with their parents to accept abuse and then they'll be loved or whatever. And so it's like, there's this opportunity to give all this anger or all this stuff to you and then just never see you again and get rid of it for a while. And then, unless it gets integrated and given back to the abuser, etc., it doesn't usually go away. So this comes up from time to time. And so the transfer of shame or the transfer of emotion, anger, rage, is an aspect. And so you can have a very intense sexual experience filled with aggression, filled with rage. And the fact that someone's giving up shame and rage and all this does not mean that the other person necessarily receives it. For example, a man, could want to punch the shit out of a woman, and the woman enjoys the intensity of energy, is not in any way under any delusion that she's not valuable, understands that she can give this experience at some level to the man within boundaries. She might say, punch a pillow and fuck me as hard as you want, but punch the pillow. You can't punch you can't punch me. And in that way, help the release occur. She has no shame about anger. He has shame about anger because he was made to feel angry and then told to stuff it, or he didn't belong to the family system. So he has the shame of being having this part of him excluded. And, if a woman is similarly abused and feels that anger is shameful, etc., then when he gives it to her, then she'll carry the shame. Because now she's angry that, he's treating her this way, but now anger is bad in her eyes, and so now the shame has been transferred. But if she's not at all threatened by that anger or anything and thinks it's great, it's good, you're getting your anger out. Punch the pillow, fuck me harder. And we'll be here together. This can lift the shame. This sets a new template in place. Wow, I'm with a partner who doesn't make certain feelings bad. So both partners get the release. The energy comes into the experience and gets harnessed in some way. And so it is a variable in a sexual experience. The inner age and the compatibility of inner ages is a very important part of sexual experiences. So on the outer level, our body is whatever chronological age that it is. But on the inner level, our emotional age varies moment by moment. One moment we might feel 6 years old, remembering someone who looks like dad. Another moment we might feel 12 years old and be all excited and curious. Another moment we're feeling in our 20s. Another moment, or I just generally feel like I'm around 25 years old. Doesn't matter how old my physical body gets, that's how old I feel inside. So the inner emotional age is really important. Now, it's remarkable how rapidly this changes, but it is a science to track the inner age. So if your partner is a 6-year-old, then how you behave will be interpreted by their 6-year-old in the sexual experience. And so if their 6-year-old likes playing but is scared of anger, then if you move and become aggressive in relationship with your partner when she is 6 years old inside, then suddenly she's scared and shuts down. If you become aggressive when she's 45 inside, she may wake up and feel alive. So there's not just a pairing of energies, there's pairing of energies at different inner ages. And so in this terrain, you might say, how old do you feel inside right now, sweetie? Well, I'm 12 years old. Okay, what does your 12-year-old feel right now, and what does she want? Well, she just likes being here and feeling like she's your best friend. Okay, I know who's here and what she's up to. How are you feeling right now? Oh, right now, my 14-year-old, she just, she's really feeling her deep love for you and this and that and just wanting to be close sexually and this. I see. Okay. And then now? So there's a pairing. There's a fluctuation of different ages, and what you'll generally find is that certain ages do really well. Certain ages in your partner pair up very nicely with certain ages inside you. You could think of this as refrigerator. That certain things in the refrigerator pair up very nicely with other things in the refrigerator, but not so well with others. Wine goes very well with grapes and cheese. Not so much with beans. They're all in the refrigerator. They're all in the psyche. But it depends how you pair them. You can get exquisite combinations, okay combinations, terrible combinations. But to partner in that domain, means you both have to be conscious of your inner ages, A, what they want, B, and C, what they're receiving, and communicate about it. I feel around 8 years old, I'm shy, I'm afraid of being rejected, and I don't want to be looked at too much. I just want to kind of have sex and not get in trouble. Okay? Have at it. I feel a little guilty right now. You seem like you're in a small age, and I feel like it's kind of robbing the cradle. It's like I feel guilty. I've bought into my cultural programming. I know it's only an inner age, but still I feel like I'm having sex with a child. I don't quite what to do there, and so I'm just not into it anymore. Well, the child probably just wants to cuddle and hug, and so that may not, you can just hug and hold the child on an inner level that's, of course, in the adult body. So this is all part of the terrain of chemistry here. Jealousy, competition, and other agendas have an impact. It's a little odd and sometimes unfortunate scenario that you express interest in someone, and the more interest you express in them, the less interest they have in you, as part of their abuse contract, their own cross-wiring of different, ways of relating. So then you partner up with someone else, and suddenly they're jealous and want to compete for your attention because you're not interested in them. They're interested in you. And so, they may have sex with you out of jealousy, out of competition, to win your attention back. That, of course, has an impact. It can have an intensifying impact, or it can be going through the motions, with no other agenda other than to have power over the interaction. I want you to be focused on me so that I can ignore you, because that's part of my masculine-feminine dynamic. Mom ignored dad, and dad pursued mom. So I'm wanting to find someone to do that with. Unconsciously, of course, but I've internalized the template from my family system. So I'm looking for people to pursue me so that I can ignore them. And I can't ignore them if they're not pursuing me, so I guess I have to have sex with you so that you'll start pursuing me again so that I can start ignoring you. And we've already talked about past life and past association. So these all are working simultaneously. There's a transcendent experience that wants to happen and another part that's afraid of going into the unknown simultaneously. There's a part that wants to love and a part that wants to abuse and violate in some way simultaneously. There's a part that's seeking adrenaline, risk, and variety, and a part that's trying to fit into the status quo and the stereotype that gives the cult's blessing. There's the need of the child always and on an inner level. There's the desire of the adolescent always at an inner level. But they can play out simultaneously in different ways. My adolescent wants to have sex, but my little boy inside knows that you don't respond to my need. And I'm afraid if my adolescent has sex and passionate sex, that what it's going to open is a false assumption that my need will be met. And whenever that opens up, you hurt me, you are unkind to me. So I don't want to let my adolescent pursue their passion because I don't want to be rejected in my need. With safety in all of this, one of the most important pieces in choreographing the type of sexuality that comes out of two people and the type of experience that emerges out of the sexuality is the relationship container. What is your sexual agreement? What is your emotional agreement? What are your expectations? How much time do you spend together? How trustworthy is that container? How faithful are you to the container? What is the priority of that container in your relationship? If one ranks the container number 1 in their life and one ranks it number 5, you're going to have pain because you've got misaligned priorities. But if both people rank the relationship as number 2 important in their life, there will be some balance, but not necessarily enough priority to have a transcendent state. Transcendent states, going into the mystical other, are pretty profound experiences that you may not want to share with someone who puts career ahead of relationship in a flippant situation where suddenly the relationship may end because a career move will take them away, and then you've had these profound experiences with someone that doesn't honor them, and so I'm not going to have them. I'm going to wait until such a situation as I actually have a relationship that feels sacred and is my highest priority. Then I will have mystical experiences in that relationship. But because I don't believe in that whole paradigm to begin with, I'm just never going to have mystical experiences, and I'll have casual relationships. So the ranking of priority, the agreement, the amount of time spent, if you spend 6 hours a day on average with someone, there's going to be a different relationship than if you see each other for a weekend 3 or 4 hours. The amount of heat is also part of this, because the more time you spend with someone in transparency, in vulnerability, the hotter the relationship becomes. The hotter the relationship becomes, it's like a greenhouse inside that container, it heats up, the more you can transform deep template regions of the psyche. Meaning the templates in childhood were formed in incredible proximity and heat in relationship to the parents. And they set and cool down at that temperature. It's like steel heating up, taking a shape, and then getting cold. Well, once steel is cold, it's really hard to move. But if you have a partnership relationship that through container, through prioritization, through honesty, through vulnerability, through trust and trustworthiness, creates 4,000 degree heat, suddenly that steel template that was formed in childhood that says that the masculine always has to violate the feminine, or the feminine always has to put down the masculine, whatever it is, that template, suddenly that can heat up, and you can shape it in a way that you want it to exist. Then when it cools down, it's in a new and more beautiful shape, and this is one of the most powerful and transcendent possibility fields of any romantic relationship.